Our story of the video is titled Nightmare at 20,000 Feet from Season 5, Episode 3, originally airing on October 11th, 1963. Our story starts with a young couple boarding a plane, Bob and Julia Wilson. It's apparent right from the jump that Bob appears uneasy as the couple sits. Julia asks if Bob would be more comfortable with her taking the window seat. He smiles slightly, saying that he will be okay with being able to see out of the window, only for Bob to look down and see his window is the auxiliary exit. The realization cuts him off mid-sentence. It's revealed that Bob had an incident occur the last time he took a flight. We're never let in on what exactly happened or why, but only that Bob had what seemed to be a mental breakdown mid-flight and has been going through therapy the last 6 months. After getting a clean bill of health from his psychiatrist, this flight is his first since his apparent mental breakdown. Julia seems to have the stark opposite experience with flying. She finds it so boring that she needs to take a sedative to sleep through it, or she grows extremely bored and aggravated. She gives her husband a few loving words of encouragement before falling asleep. But this is what I like to call plot-induced stupidity. Because taking a sleeping pill when your potentially mentally unstable husband is aboard his first flight, you'd think she would want to remain awake. But if she had, the story wouldn't have played out the same. The door to the plane closes as Julia drifts off to sleep, and the nervousness is clearly visible on Bob's face. He's trying to keep a lid on it, convincing himself he'll be fine, eager to return home to his children after being gone for treatment the last 6 months. Some time passes, and just as Bob seems to relax, the plane begins to fly through a storm. Bob reads a magazine, but his attention is drawn to the window with every lightning flash. During one of the flashes, Bob thinks he sees something out in the darkness. He leans forward, trying to get a better look through the misty window. The lightning flashes again, and Bob sees the silhouette of a man on the wing of the aircraft, slowly walking toward him. He looks on, watching in horror and disbelief. He considers waking his wife, but is unsure if what he's seeing is real. His unease rises as the creature gets closer and closer to his window. Bob looks around, desperate to know if anyone else is seeing the monster too. He frantically presses the call light to get the stewardess to come witness what he's seeing. The monster is mere feet from his window as he rapidly presses the button again and again. The stewardess seems to take her time as Bob frantically waves her over. She leans in, asking what he needs, and he says there's a man out on the wing. The stewardess, completely caught off guard, lets all professionalism drop, demanding he repeat what he said, swearing she must have misheard him. He tells her to look for herself, but when he looks back to show her, to his horror, there's nothing there. Confused, he stammers out what he had seen. The commotion wakes his wife. Unable to explain what it was or where it went, Bob concedes that he must have imagined it and requests a glass of water. His wife, half asleep, asks if he's okay. He says with the wind and rain, he must have been seeing things, telling her to go back to sleep. Bob closes the cover to the window, fighting with himself over whether or not to open the curtain again, telling himself that what he saw was just his mind playing tricks. But the terrifying thought creeps in. What if it was real? His curiosity wins out, and he yanks the curtain open, shockingly seeing the creature's face pressed right up against the window. He watches in horror as the creature makes direct eye contact with its contorted face and sunken eyes. He closes his eyes, struggling to breathe, trying and failing to tell himself that it's all in his mind. He keeps whispering to himself that it isn't really there. He looks back at the window, and the creature is still there, staring at him. He tries to wake his wife, but she won't move. He calls the stewardess back over in a panic, and just before she reaches his seat, the creature is seen leaping up and out of sight. The stewardess asks how she can help him, but Bob doesn't answer, only looking out of the window with an expression of pure shock frozen on his face. Knowing the stewardess won't believe his story, He just turns back and meekly asks how much longer the storm will last. She smiles, telling him it won't be much longer, and in fact they'll be landing soon. It's all clear skies where they're headed, before walking off. He tries to wake his wife, but she doesn't budge. The creature reappears on the wing, almost as if it's mocking Bob at this point. Bob watches as the creature messes with the engine, playfully sticking its fingers in the propellers and back again, almost as if it's a game. Bob watches in terror as the monster begins to rip up the welded plates of the wing. He's finally able to wake his wife. But of course, the monster disappears once again. He tells her, as calmly as he can, that the creature is messing with one of the engines. He knows that for a man who suffered a mental breakdown the last time he flew, all of this sounds crazy. But he tells her, clear-minded, that he doesn't really care what she thinks of him. He just needs her to do one thing. He wants her to tell the pilot what he said, and for them to watch the wings. He says that if they watch and see nothing, he'll commit himself to the mental asylum the moment they land. But he tells her, if what he's seeing is real, they might crash rather than land. Julia looks at him in horror, agreeing that just in case, it's best to do what he asked. He says he knows it sounds extraordinary, and it's like she'll be advertising her marriage to a lunatic. But he says it's important that she does it. Julia smiles, saying that she'll tell them. This being pre-2001, Julia goes to knock on the cockpit door. The stewardess stops her, asking how she can help. As she begins to explain, the pilot walks out. Just as he does, Bob sees the monster messing with the metal plating of the wing again. He yells out for them to hurry, frantically waving the pilot over. He explains what he's seen, and the pilot tells him to keep his voice down, so as not to scare the other passengers. Bob begs him to just look out the window, and yet again, nothing's there. Bob is dumbfounded. The pilot tells him that yes, there is a man on the wing, but he needs to stay quiet, so as not to terrify the other passengers. Bob is shocked that not only has the pilot seen it too, but that he's seemingly unfazed by the fact that there's a creature on the wing. The tone of the pilot's voice gives Bob reason to pause. It becomes clear to Bob that the pilot is patronizing him, in order to get Bob to stop panicking and causing a scene. The pilot continues to play along, but Bob tells him he can stop. He says he won't say another word about it, warning him that when they crash, he tried to warn them. But instead of heeding that warning and just watching the wings, they chose to placate him instead, saying that he'd rather see the plane crash than continue to scream into the void. Some time passes, and Bob continues to watch as the creature returns to mess with the engine again. Knowing that the pilot and flight staff won't help or believe him, he begins looking around the plane for something he can use to get the creature off the wing. Looking around, he sees the holstered gun of a sleeping air marshal. Adapting a plan on the fly, Bob takes off his seatbelt and makes his way over to the air marshal. He goes to grab the gun, but the marshal stirs, causing him to second-guess himself. Bob tosses something onto the floor and pretends to pick it up, slowly and softly removing the gun from the sleeping marshal's holster. Stowing it in his breast pocket, he returns back to his seat. Gun in hand, he looks down at the auxiliary exit handle. He almost pulls it, but stops himself. He clicks himself back into his seatbelt, slowly amping himself up to do what nobody else would. Not wanting his wife to get sucked out of the plane, he wakes her, asking her to get him a glass of water. As she walks away, Bob puts his plan in motion. He opens the auxiliary exit and is nearly sucked out of the plane. His wife and the other passengers watch on in horror, as the only thing standing between Bob and death is a thin strap of biwoven nylon. Fighting the rapid wind and rain, Bob tries to steady himself. The creature begins walking over to him. Bob takes aim and fires multiple shots at the creature. It seems to fall over dead and off the wing. Bob finally stops fighting the sheer wind and goes limp, screaming in a mix of victory and pain. Later, on the tarmac, Bob is carted away on a gurney. Everyone is talking about Bob, half angrily calling him a nutcase, and the other half whispering words of sympathy for both Bob and his wife. He tells his wife that he knows what she's thinking, but that she and everyone else will see. As Bob is loaded into the back of the ambulance, we see the torn-up plate of the wing with faint claw marks, showing that though they don't believe him now, they all soon will, as the screen fades to black. When it comes to A Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, there's a few interesting things. For example, Bill Shatner is famously known for starring in the episode. However, this was actually Shatner's second trip into the Twilight Zone. He previously starred in the Season 2 episode titled The Nick of Time. His agent strongly warned him not to return for a second episode, fearing he would become typecast in sci-fi and mystery roles. Shatner loved the script too much to pass it up, and, just as his agent warned, almost as if it was the ultimate cosmic irony, 3 years later, in 1966, Bill Shatner stepped onto the bridge of the USS Enterprise as Captain James T. Kirk in the long-running series Star Trek. If you enjoyed the colorized version, there's a channel here on YouTube that has been doing something really cool. It's called Twilight Zone in color. I'll put a link in the description down below. Tell him Uncle Tony sent you. This isn't the first time I've covered this story. Almost 2 years ago, I covered Twilight Zone the movie from 1983, which, in its final segment, remade this very story. Only it starred John Lithgow instead. So, I'll just let me from 2 years ago close out the video. Nightmare at 20,000 Feet has been a fan favorite for decades, inspiring countless parodies and references, including a memorable nod in The Simpsons and even by John Lithgow himself in Third Rock from the Sun.
So, how was your trip, sir?
Horrifying at first. I looked out the window and I saw something on the wing of the plane. The same thing happened to me.
The idea of gremlins sabotaging aircraft stems from aviation folklore popularized during World War II. Pilots attributed unexplained mechanical failures to these mischievous creatures, which became a way to cope with the dangers of flying. The concept even appeared in wartime cartoons, including a famous Looney Tunes short where Bugs Bunny faces off against a gremlin. But if you guys want to check this out for yourself, I'll put a link down in the description below. But anyway, take care, have a good weekend, have a good week, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.